Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for attending this meeting in the framework of the Lifelong Learning Week 2020, which unfortunately is taking place only virtually, so we cannot see, but we can interact with each other. And in particular, I'd like to thank you for joining this conversation today, where we want to talk a little bit more general about the bigger picture, what should be behind the concepts of digital competence, which kind of knowledge, skills, and attitudes do European citizens under a lifelong perspective in very different kind of educational settings and learning situations need and develop in order to cope with the digital transformation. So let me introduce myself just first shortly. I am a member of the DARE network, Democracy and Human Rights Education in Europe. And we are a network dedicated to civic education, education for democratic citizenship and human rights education, and promoting this approach in different countries and in particular in the non-formal learning and educational scene in Europe. And concretely, I am dealing at the moment with a project called Digital Transformation in Adult Learning for Active Citizenship. And yeah, our main idea is to challenge the concept of digital competences insofar as we perceive that digital transformation is not mainly an economic process or a technological process, how it is often perceived in the media and also, unfortunately, in the educational sector. But it's also a process shaping our social reality, our culture, and nearly every practice in Europe is under transformation. And so we don't need only to talk about AI, big data, artificial intelligence. We should talk about the way how digitalization was shifting our cooperation and our work, our engagement as active citizens. And so it is rather a digital transformation as a social, cultural, economic, and political process. And so that's giving us a little bit also the perspective for this workshop. So, and thank you, Rasmus Andresen, Victor Negrescu, and Una Aitken from Lifelong Learning Platform that you found the time to discuss it with us. And yeah, that should be my first words. And I would like to hand over to Una, the moderator of this session.
Thank you very much, Niels. Welcome, everybody. I'm Una Aitken. I'm a member of the Lifelong Learning Platform Steering Committee and President of Volunteer Europe. And I'm going to try and, as best I can, moderate this session today. So first off, we're going to have a statement from each of our MEP guests, and thank you so much for making the time to be with us today. And then I'm going to abuse my position as moderator and just say a few words on behalf of the Lifelong Learning Platform, because unfortunately we don't have any other representatives of civil society on the panel today. Obviously we've got all you guys who are going to contribute afterwards, I hope. And then when we've done that, I've got a number of questions I'm going to put to the panel, and I think we'll try and intersperse their answers to these questions with your contributions as well. So if you want to speak once the initial statements are over, if you want to contribute by giving your answer to the question or coming in with a comment, then please indicate on the chat that you want to speak, and Niels and I will look at the chat and try and bring you in as appropriate. We've got until 4:30, and I want to leave 3 or 4 minutes at the end for people to make final statements and for Niels to wrap up. So we've got a good chunk of time to have this discussion today. So can I invite MEP Negrescu, please, from Romania, to just give us a 3 to 5 minute statement around this topic of digital transformation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and I'm really happy to be here and to continue the conversation with all of you on education, this time on digital transformation. Because like you said very well in your initial remarks, digital transformation requires a process that needs everyone to be part of. I was saying earlier in another conference organized this week that of course we need ownership of the process itself, and this ownership should be given, of course, to stakeholders, to parents, to pupils, to students, to professors, to to all that want to get involved in managing the process. And in order to do that, we have to make sure that digital transformation is part of a multi-stakeholder approach, and in the same time generates the participation of all those stakeholders in the process of this transformation, especially with regards to digital education. In this respect, in the European Parliament, I'm the rapporteur in charge of the report on shaping European digital education policy. And in that specific report, we address a couple of issues that you have addressed also in the presentation of this interesting conversation today, meaning that, first of all, we need to invest, and you mentioned that very clearly, to invest widely across Europe in having access to technologies, but also having access to, let's say, everything that is related to education in a digital environment, meaning, of course, modernizing the curriculums and adapting them based on the ages and the beneficiaries of the process. We need, of course, to invest in making sure that the tools that are being used, the digital tools, the artificial intelligence, that the component of AI that are being used, and all the other technological instruments are adapted to educational process. We also have to make sure that we invest in teacher training, in getting information into parents, in making sure that the point of view of the beneficiaries of the educational process is being heard and is being integrated in how we are defining, again, this digital transformation of education. In this respect, of course, the European Parliament has called and has made this recommendation to allocate at least 10% for education in the recovery plans that are being drafted by national member states, and to allocate 20% of national recovery plans for digital. And of course, that means as well, digital transformation. I took a look at the report that have already been drafted by a couple of member states, and we don't see the 10% and we don't see the 20% that are requested by European institutions and, of course, stakeholders like ourselves from the European Parliament. So there is still a long way to go. This is why again, my call to all of you and at the beginning of this conference is to identify suitable ways to, first of all, answers to the current challenges raised by digital transformation, making sure that we do not leave anyone behind, making sure that everyone is part of the process, even people from vulnerable groups, even people, of course, from disadvantaged backgrounds, people with disabilities. We have gender equality when it comes to access to technologies. So we have to make sure that, of course, this is an open process where we have, again, local stakeholders, European stakeholders part of the process. I was looking at some data and I noticed that, we digitalized our education, and the 6th most used educational platforms in Europe are not created in Europe, which might be a solution, but at the same time, it might be interesting to develop again and to use again the technological capacities and the innovation that we have in Europe on those respective, in this respective field of education. So a lot of complicated issues to be addressed. I only raised a couple. There are also other issues that are important, like certification, authentication, data use in digital education. Of course, though I'm also ready to answer all the questions and the comments that are going to appear in today's conversation, try to identify together solutions and to see how the European Parliament might intervene in that. Please, in the meantime, I'm going to put there a link. Look at the report that we have drafted, and let's have an open conversation on this important topic, because at the end, digital transformation should lead to digital citizenship, in my opinion. And for that, it requires the support and the participation of everyone, also answering the most difficult questions and again, the challenges that are being addressed to us by these digital transformations that is currently happening. Thank you again, and I'm more than happy to be here. Thank you.
Thanks so much, and thank you very much for keeping to time as well. That's excellent. So can I invite now MEP Andresen, please, to make your initial statement? Thank you.
Yes, thanks for the invite, and I'm happy to discuss these issues together with you and also with my colleague Victor from the European Parliament. First of all, I would like to mention that I'm from the Greens in the European Parliament, from the German Greens, and member of the committee, the IMCO committee, the ITRE committee, and the budget committee. And of course, my perspective is also related to the committees I'm working in. Basically, when it comes to digital, then it's the ITRE committee with the industry committee, research committee, and on the other side, the IMCO committee as the internal market committee. And I think this maybe is also an interesting perspective for the discussion, also in addition to what Victor already were mentioning. 1 year ago, the European Commission started the work, and one of the main goals of the new Commission, Ursula von der Leyen mentioned that several times in her speeches, for example, also to the European Parliament, is that the EU or Europe should become sovereign when it comes to the digital sector. And when we are looking on that, then I think it's quite important that we are having in mind that this not even just means that we are coming up with infrastructural solutions, or that we are not just coming up with some laws on European level, but that we really need to lay the ground also in the member states, in the civil society, so that this process will be a process where everybody is included, which means that the 55-year-old worker from, I don't know, Poland would be included in the process like the 13-year-old girl in France, or the senior citizen from Germany. Everybody should be part of the strategy, and we can just become sovereign if we are addressing all of them and not just some few targeted groups. And for this, there are some regulatory questions we are discussing right now. A lot, like, for example, on the Digital Services Act, on the question of how to deal with artificial intelligence, how to deal with the market power of Amazon, Google, and others. And then there are some, I would call it more soft power solutions or elements in this discussion, who even are as important as the other elements. And there, I think we really need to see some development. And there, you all know that the European Union can play an important role, but it's like we are not the ones making the laws, or we are not responsible, for example, for education on a more concrete picture. So what we can do is to come up with some innovative solutions. What we can do is to finance, for example, through different kinds of programs, also the developing of digital skills, for example. And you all know that the EU is doing this in a lot of member states already, and I think we need to continue with that. I'm, for example, working on the cybersecurity issue. This is an important issue as well, also when it comes to developing digital skills. And there, I think we really need to see on the process with civil society. We need to find solutions, and we need to have some capacity building also related to open source, where we can find also some solutions where we are not just giving competences or informations to the broader public and how to deal with cybersecurity issues related to your own life, but that we also will have a participatory character, so that the process of creating, for example, cybersecurity will be a process where civil society, where everybody also can become involved. And I think this is really important. And I really think that there also the European institutions need to be better. And this is the last thing I would like to say. I think we are good in coming up with regulation. I think we are good with addressing some of also the problems on a broader picture, but when it comes to a participatory character, then I think with all of the different elements, me and also Victor already were talking about, we need to do some more. And there I think you can be key, because you are working with lifelong learning, with issues like that. So there we also really need your input, and I'm happy to discuss this in the next hour together with you. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And Niels, you would like to say something now. I think Niels and I will just say a few words on behalf of civil society at this point, and then we'll start the discussion. Niels,
yeah, thank you.
Please.
Thank you both for this reflections, and I'd like to mention here the conclusions of the Council in regard to digital education and European knowledge society. Quite fresh document, and it is exactly presenting the scope in a refreshingly holistic way, because it's saying in the analysis section that digital education is a condition for co-creating the digital change, and it is important, it should be important to reflect the social dimension of digital transformation. And obviously, since it's a document about digital education, it is quite strongly focusing on the digital technology and so let's say Mr. Negrescu's perspective, and representing the discourse in the EU on digital education. And what I'm wondering is, when it's coming to the conclusions and to the measures, I see, if you would say, if this is the creation of the digital learning, this is quite in a focus, and EU has a good a good framework for it. But when it comes to these things which Mr. Andresen was mentioning, I would say, in contrast to digital learning, it is learning about the digital. I see a little bit the blind spot in this. You mentioned the Digital Service Act. We know that the impact will be quite huge of this renewed Digital Service Act. But does any citizen in Europe, beyond the advocates and lobbyists, know that? You mentioned the open source. So how many educational institutions are empowered to use decentralized open source technology, appropriate big blue button accounts, or using tools that were developed from Europe and for Europe, like CryptoPad or something else? So we are lacking a little bit this also in the digital education, this connection between reflecting the challenges, the economic, social, cultural challenges, and bringing them into our educational discourses. And my question also to the two MEPs would be then, Mr. Andresen mentioned that you need participation. Obviously, you need in the discussions also on these measures, trustworthy AI, cybersecurity issues, the creation of the digital single market, citizens, and a discourse which can be facilitated also by adult learning providers. What is lacking here concretely? What would you wish? And Mr. Negrescu, also, do you see that that we need more learning about the digital transformation? That's my question to you. Or do I don't catch the state of the digital education discourse in Europe right? So that would be my questions.
Thanks very much. Just before we open the discussion and I ask some questions, I just wanted to just say a very few words on behalf of the Lifelong Learning Platform. Clearly, as the Lifelong Learning Platform, we welcome the Digital Action Plan. But reading through it, there's a lot of questions still to be answered. And I would highlight from our point of view a number of things. The COVID-19 pandemic has really thrown up the digital divide. I think we're kind of in danger of all agreeing with each other in this session, but that's no bad thing. And we've been struck by how disadvantaged, vulnerable groups of all kinds have been in that situation. And there is a danger that it's not just the COVID-19 pandemic that causes this, but this is going to be a general problem for the future. So we've seen the fact that young people don't all have access to either infrastructure or hardware. And it's been mentioned before, we've got various abilities across the European Union of teachers being able to access and use digital tools, especially thrown in at the deep end with the pandemic. Many parents have been called upon to help to homeschool in a situation where perhaps they don't have the digital skills to work with their children. There's a huge issue around whether online learning and being on screen for most of the day has an effect on learners and teachers and VET providers and adult learners and non-formal learning, whether it has an effect on mental well-being. So that's another aspect of this to consider. The whole assessment process has been thrown into some confusion by the pandemic and by the increase in online learning. So there's although the digital transformation is here to stay, there are a whole lot of questions to be asked about how we get all these things right in the implementation of that digital action plan. And my last point really would be, I think, it's picking up what everybody has said. And we talked about this yesterday in terms of the European education area. If member states don't get on board with this, if they're not communicating to stakeholders on the ground what all of this is about, then we have no hope of implementing the digital transformation plan. There's a real need for a communication strategy around this, so that, just as was said, people on the ground in member states know about all of this, they know what to expect, they know what support's available from the European Union, and they know what their own member states should be doing in terms of providing financial and other investment into this digital transformation. So welcome the plan, but lots of questions to be asked around it. So let's go straight into the discussion. I've got a couple of questions that I'm going to throw out, and let's take both the MEP's contributions as well as your own contributions. So the first question for us is, which aspects do you still feel are underrepresented in educational discussions and approaches, and also in concepts of digital competencies? So what are we still not talking about in terms of educational discussions and approaches around the digital transformation? Can I invite you, Mr. Negrescu, to comment on that?
Yeah, so are we commenting just on the question or on your interventions as well? Because you raised a couple of issues as well.
You can comment on anything you like.
Yeah, so just a quick reply to what you said, to the question that you addressed to us. I think it's the human dimension that is lacking. You know, we imagine digital transformation is something that needs to happen like this, but we never, you know, talk about the need to involve people and how we can accommodate digital transformation with what we are used to do or in doing, and making sure that everyone is part of the process. And this is, of course, developed. It's a development process. It's not something that happens immediately. So, you know, we always expect a revolution that will immediately change people's minds, but it's not about that. It's about a process, ongoing process that started already many years ago, and that needs to continue, that needs to move faster in order to adapt to today's world and to digital changes and new tools that are appearing, and let's say improving our way of life. But again, we are not, let's say, the followers or the slaves of technology. We are the ones that are managing technology and implement it in order for it to be of good use for us. Also in education in all fields, and we have to be aware of that in integrating everyone. Inclusive digital transformation is a key aspect, in my opinion, to be mentioned and to be highly discussed upon and introduced also in the documents, like in the Digital Education Action Plan released by the Commission. They do not speak enough about digital citizenship and about this inclusiveness that is absolutely necessary that we are addressing in the European Parliament, because this is key. Of course, we can speak about a new culture. I would not like to refer to it as being a new culture, just how we can use those tools, and that we can have, let's say, we are fully aware of the opportunities offered by those new tools. We can control them, we can use them, we can adapt them. And of course, it means, of course, that's like, for instance, with regards to education. Digital education doesn't mean to, let's say, open the camera and do the class. This is not about that. It's about developing tools that are adapted to digital means, that are, of course, offering this action of fulfilling education, of doing education. We shouldn't reduce the quality of our standards because we are digitalizing things. So again, it's quite complicated. And of course, I'm ready to intervene more on this topic later on. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Anderson, comments on what's been said or the question I asked?
Yes, of course. Well, I mean, you asked about what is missing right now, and for me, of course, the question of access to hardware, software, of course, is something also on an individual basis, which is a key, and where there's still are a lot of problems and challenges ahead, also related to educational institutions and the possibilities of using technology for education is still not solved. And I mean, I'm from Germany, a very rich country in the European Union, with a lot of challenges, also when it comes, for example, to access and tools, and there, of course, my hope at least is that we are starting to see a shift in thinking about these kind of issues, also because of COVID, because we all know how important also digital technology, also related to education, had been in this year, and everybody had seen how many challenges we had. But as my colleague already mentioned, for me, this is also not just a question of access, but it's also or of a transfer of coming with technology, but it's also a shift in the way education can happen, because we all know that technology, that digital tools can give us a completely new understanding of how education also can work. You can do it much more participatory. You can use a lot of tools for having real, also good development, so that you also can explain questions or complicated issues much more easily because of technology. And this is something where I think we all know that there are a lot of best practices, but that we need to transfer it to have it accessible for a broad majority, but not just in a way of access to technology, but also in an understanding of a shift of how important this issue is. And there I would like to mention that awareness for these kind of questions is key, both related to educational institutions, but also to the broader public. And there I see the two issues we were starting to discuss at the beginning interlinked, because if there is not a broader understanding of these kind of questions in public, then you won't be successful with finding solutions yeah, everybody can relate to. So this means that things are interlinked and that we really need to see how we can address this on a more broader perspective. And coming from Germany, I can say this is quite a hard challenge, also related to priorities politics and others have to say.
How true. Now I see on the chat, Janice Richardson, who represents the Council of Europe's Digital Citizen Education Working Group, has some interesting points. Janice, would you like to take the floor and just elaborate on some of the things that you put in the chat?
Yes, certainly. Thank you for this opportunity. Well, first of all, at the Council of Europe, we believe that there are around 20 competences that are absolutely vital for democratic citizenship. And these also are relevant for digital citizenship. And these values and attitudes are very important. These are developed in the home, which underlines the great importance of parents' skills and understanding and critical understanding and knowledge come next when the child goes to school. So we think it's very important to work with parents when they're very young in child-minding centers, for example. The adults working there should be able to coach the parents so that they fully understand what children need if they're really going to be an active citizen in the world. Look at the World Economic Forum. Every 5 years, they bring out a list of the 10 most necessary competences if you're going to thrive in the world of tomorrow, and these match the 20 competences that the Council of Europe has put forward. Thirdly, I come from Australia, and Australia is renowned for its remote learning because it's something we've had to do over the past 70 years. And I think that the methodologies today are simply not suitable for the technology. One, the platforms. We need non-commercial platforms, but you've already spoken about that. But secondly, we need new innovative ways where the children can also use technology to go off and learn, go off and create things. And that should be part of this remote learning. We have to get away from the chalk and talk. There were great ideas, for example, learning networks where children can work together, children of all ages with experts, and go much deeper into subjects. There are a lot of ideas, but we're not using those ideas at present. I wrote the Digital Citizenship Education Handbook for the Council of Europe. It is available on the Council of Europe DCE site, and there you can find more ideas. Thank you very much for giving me the floor.
Thanks so much, Janice. That's really helpful. Maybe we could put a link to the handbook in the chat if somebody from LLP can maybe find it and stick it into the chat. Sorry, I was muted. Now, Ted Huddleston has asked, yes, you can do it more participatory, but this is not happening. Why not? And I think that's perhaps quite a good question to ask our two MEPs. It's also a good one for civil society because we are the people that can make that participation happen. But perhaps, Mr. Negrescu, you'd like to make a comment on why it's not why participation is not happening, why we're not doing this in a more co-creative way with civil society and with stakeholders.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, you are perfectly right. We have to make sure that all stakeholders are part of the process, that the civil society, relevant stakeholders are consulted. The Commission launched this idea of having educational hubs across Europe. And this might be a solution to integrate better those points of view coming from those different stakeholders, but it depends how they are being designed, how those hubs are being drafted, and to which extent relevant stakeholders are being involved in the process. So we have to, of course, open the process. Education should be the result. Digitalizing education should be the result of those consultations. Digital transformation should be an integrated process, And of course, yeah, not everyone is doing so well. So this is why I recommended to integrate digital education in the European semester format, have an ongoing evaluation of what is happening across EU member states, having that in the European semester every year to see how things are moving and to which degree, of course, the relevant stakeholders are involved in the process. And this will enable us, of course, to have a permanent adaptation to the current needs and to the request of the actual people working on this topic on the ground. So we need to do that. And here, recommendations coming from the Commission are also relevant. This is a European dimension that we need with regards to digital transformation and with regards to digital education. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Go ahead, please.
Yes, thanks. Just very briefly, my experience with European institutions are that they are not good in bottom-up processes, and this is how the European Union is constructed in a way, and it's also not like the thinking in the institutions are, and we need to change that. And this is what I would like to do. And related to the cybersecurity example I mentioned earlier, it's about the Cybersecurity Center, where there are lots of issues I don't want to talk about, but one of the issues we are dealing with there is awareness raising related to cybersecurity, and to include civil society. And there, actually, the European Parliament, in the trilogue we are having in these weeks, are the institutions where is the institution where we would who's actually fighting for including civil society and others. And the problem right now is the Council, are the member states, because there is also a power play related to who is responsible for what, and who will have the power at the end to decide about these kind of questions. And my feeling is that there is a fear in some of the institutions to lose power if you are including civil society more than you are doing now. But on the content, I fully agree with my colleague, but just to answer on the question of what is the reason for why this is so complicated.
Thank you. Ted, would you like to come in and give your point of view? You asked the question.
Yes, if you don't mind. Just to say that I'm also coming from the same group as Janice, who spoke just earlier. We're both on the Democratic Citizenship Education Working Group at the Council of Europe. And I have a particular interest in this from the point of view of education of young people, formal and informal, but particularly at school. And one thing that seems to have happened during the pandemic is that whereas participation, student participation in school, sometimes called student voice or learner voice, these kind of things, was, I would say, kind of, a growing phenomenon in European schools generally. Once we moved to an emphasis and reliance on remote learning during the pandemic, this was the bit of education that was completely dropped. And there's some interesting research being done recently, very recently, obviously, on this, commissioned by UNESCO and carried out by the University of Roehampton in the UK, looking at the effect of the pandemic on student voice in education, or shall we say student participation in their learning and their education institutions. And universally, the whole thing kind of dropped, disappeared. The participation seemed to depend upon there being a physical school. And no one has thought through, how does this apply? How does participation mean? This is for young people in their institutions. How does this apply when you no longer have a physical school or the school isn't so immediate? And why I emphasize this is that this is where participation in wider society begins, I would like to argue, with learning participation and being empowered and feeling empowered by being able to participate from a young age. And this is something we take very seriously in our particular group at the Council of Europe and are working on now ways of training teachers to be able to adapt to this new situation. Now, sorry to hog the floor from the Council of Europe for so much, but thank you for the opportunity nonetheless. Thank
you. That's very interesting. Actually, it's a neat segue into another issue that I raised and that someone else in the chat has raised. Georg, Juergens, you're raising issues related to health and well-being of young learners connected to digital education. How can we ensure that during the pandemic their already high levels of screen time are not further increased and that children don't miss out on their healthy development? Georg, would you like to expand on that? I'm sorry, I can't see you on the screen. Oh, yes, I can. Yeah.
Yes, I just switched on the camera again. Thank you. Yes, indeed. So I'm representing the European Council for Steiner Waldorf Education. We already had an event on the matter in the morning, and I'm quite sure some of you took part. So for us, the pandemic has really on the one hand, this opportunity of studying how digital education works, and we're all in the middle of that. But of course, it has also to people stuck in front of their screen for much longer time than usual. And we are very worried what that does to the health of children. And the question is really for us, to what extent is the use of digital tools in schools really needed, especially for young children? And whether there are not other learning tasks in primary education involve a lot more physical and artistic education, training the sensory motor skills of children, and whether there is a place for that in all the EU documents on digital education, how to find the right balance, the time and analog forms of teaching.
Thank you. Would either of the MEPs like to comment on that? So how do we achieve this balance between different forms of teaching, and how can that be reflected in EU policy? Mr. Negrescu, Mr. Anderson, any comments?
Just shortly on that. Of course, yes, we need to adapt the digitalization of education to what people are using. They use smartphones or tablets, even design in Romania, the first Romania digital education platform, or digital education tablet. So I'm very much aware of how complicated it is, of course, to do all of that. And of course, how important it is to, again, make sure that this is a transparent and open process to which people can participate. And this is a key element to be underlined. Of course, gamifying, it can be a solution. It's also introduced in the report that we have drafted. There are different solutions in place. We have to be open to any new ideas and initiatives, and we have to study how to do that. So adapting curriculums, adapting pedagogical practices, adapting everything to all of that is quite essential in this regard.
Thank you. Okay, let's move on to another question for our MEPs today. So we assume a need for an understanding of artificial intelligence, data economy, digital rights, digital infrastructure, etc., i.e. an understanding of the bigger picture of digital transformation in order to adapt to the changes in a democratic way. Do you agree? And if you do, what would be the measures and activities that you would suggest can support this and can support the adult population in Europe? So do we need to go beyond the bigger picture of infrastructure is the question. Mr. Anderson, would you like to comment on that?
Yes, I can, thanks. Well, I mean, of course, I agree. And of course, there are a lot of challenges ahead related to that. I mean, on European level right now, like also in many member states, when it comes to infrastructure, we are in a heavy discussion about how to handle 5G and how to handle sovereignty related to 5G. The issue of Huawei had been raised in many of the member states. but also related to maybe security questions related to that, not just related to 5G, but also when it comes to smart technology and questions like that on the question of what will happen with your data and issues like that. There, I think it will be key to have to address this, also not just from an infrastructural perspective, but also from a more general society perspective, and all the also societal impacts this also has for development in the European Union. And there, I think we are not strong enough. I mean, the Commission is addressing this. They are trying to come up with questions like that. But for me, there is still not enough work on that when it comes to the member states. Maybe not all of them. You can always find some examples going in a different direction. But in many of the member states, these challenges are not addressed enough, at least not in a way that the broader public is discussing it, or at least is trying to deal with that. And I think this is something where we really also need to find some solutions and some ways to have some development related to these questions, and there I think we need to see some more action.
Thank you. Mr. Negeskew, would you like to comment? I think this is a really important point. It links, I think, this whole area with democracy and with democratic rights. And I'll bring Niels in after that. I'm sure you've got a point to make on that too.
Shortly again, because I'm confronted with a couple of technical issues at the same time. Just to come back to the previous question on gamification, we have to take into consideration all the concerns. And we have to make sure that, of course, we don't forget about the role of the teacher and the education institution in the process, but also of people advising us, of tutors, of parents. So this is key in my opinion. So regarding the bigger picture, it's more than infrastructure. Digital transformation is more than infrastructure. It's about digital citizenship. It's about knowing the rights, knowing the opportunities, having control over your, let's say, digital person, knowing how to use the information that is available online, knowing how to adapt content to digital platforms, having using those elements in a useful way, like personalization, tailor-made education, tailor-made tools. So of course, this requires a lot of effort. Like I said earlier, digital transformation is not something like it's happening like this from one day to another. It's an open process, and we need to have an open process for real, where of course the concerns are put in place. We provide answers to the concerns, because in those different disputes on what is the best solution to adapt, we have the best, we have the efficient solution that appears. So this is what has been my call, and I hope that you share as well, is to go more into that, not again block the process, not delay the process, but transform the process as something that is on which we have ownership at European level, but also at the level of stakeholders that are relevant in the field. Thank you.
Thank you, Niels, or another of your colleagues from the DARE network. Do you want to come in?
I'd like to refer back to the question that was raised before a little bit. It was about the civil society itself, and I have to admit that civic education and educational providers, they feel not equipped for tackling these questions in a holistic way. So the digital transformation questions which Mr. Andresen raised. And what I see is that also the civil society, for instance, the data activists, that they are slightly becoming aware that they need to pedagogize their work a little bit to translate it. And I would see there a big synergy, honestly speaking. IEU can can do something, could support projects and allowing civil society to build these cooperations between the pedagogues and the non-pedagogues in the civil society. In particular, when it's on lifelong learning, in a lot of countries, we have not an elaborated system of adult education. And this kind of cooperation, it might also be a part of the little bit going in the direction of colleague Georg Pirker, what he's saying here, if we don't need a new approach of governance. So let's say digital co-determination and how to do that. And also Lisette van der Ark was mentioning a kind of digital empowerment. I would see there much more cooperation as one strategy for this empowerment, but I don't want to rephrase your words, Georg and Lisette.
Thank you. Mr. Andresen, would you like to come in, and then Georg Pirker, I'll bring you in.
Yes, I just would like to say that I fully agree. And I mean, my political party, I don't even know if our group in the parliament is supporting that. We haven't discussed that yet, but my political party in Germany, we came up with the idea of an institute for political and democracy education, a European institute, like we are having them in Germany, Zentralen für politische Bildung, as they are called in German. And of course, this could also, for example, be something where you could organize the process through, because we can see that this is important on many different levels. So this could be an idea to institutionalize it also in the European Union, with at the same time respecting that some of the issues we are dealing with here are also in the competency of the member states. And of course, we have to be aware of that. I know this is boring, but from an institutional perspective in the European Union, this is important. But this could be a way to deal with some of the things you were mentioning.
Yeah. Georg Pirker, would you like to say a few words? You had some interesting things in the chat.
Wait one moment. Yep, it should work. Yeah, I wanted just to share, I have a bit the impression that kind of if we talk in education just about the challenge we have ahead of us, like through digitization, we probably do not fit rightly to it. I see this whole digitization as an ongoing process, which is not really new. It's something which goes on for 20, 25 years right now. And if we just see it as kind of, regardless of what educational field we are in, whether we are in adult learning, in vocational education and training, in youth work, non-formal education with a huge competence in it, or in the formal school system, if we just see these challenges for teaching and learning and understanding it, we probably miss that this digital transformation is already shaping our societal being for years now. Yeah. So my question is whether the competences we introduce to tackle it, whether they are right now the Council of Europe framework for democratic citizenship competences, or whether we look for the World Economic Forum future predicted competences. Very often they are based still on a perception that are based on an, let's say, on an analog shaped reality, which doesn't at all take into account the power let's say the digital transformation actually already has on our social reality. And so I wanted to question whether we should not see, or whether as educators we should not much more understand our role in facilitating these processes and in addressing these processes from a perspective which is much more person-centered, society-centered, asking dimensions of rights, asking dimensions of equality, asking dimensions of access, which are pretty analog dimensions, but having a look on how we can co-govern these processes of digitization in all aspects of our life, not only kind of by using Zoom classroom or kind of a digital learning module, but really preparing or supporting people in understanding that they are living in a reality which is governed by different economic, social, and also societal models, pretty much under pressure also from actors external to Europe. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you. That actually takes us neatly into my last question that I had prepared for or Niels and I had prepared for the panel. And that was what the specific qualities of a rights-centered and participation-focused educational approach towards digital transformation might be, and what role that might play in our digital education and learning strategies. So that's actually just moving on from what Georg just said to perhaps the more of the specifics around how do we actually do this. Would our MEPs like to comment? Mr. Anderson? Niels?
I can.
Sorry, I had technical problems, so I just understood the half of your question. So maybe you can repeat, or Niels will answer as the first one. It's also fine.
No, it's okay. I'll repeat it. So, what are the specific qualities of a rights-centered and participation-focused educational approach towards digital transformation? And what role might that play in our digital education and learning strategies? So it's taking the last speaker's comments and I guess making them more concrete. How do we implement this?
Okay. Yeah, I would say what my perception or our perception also from this our project digital is what we need to discuss also here is if we don't perceive a renaissance of rights-based education, because when we are talking a lot of privacy and security issues and so, but I guess not a lot of people, they are able to define what privacy and security and technical and physical integrity is. And maybe like the Council of Europe always says, if you know your human rights, then you are able to apply it to a certain context. And maybe we need this again. While in the civic education sector, we left this rights-centered approach a little bit out of focus, or at some parts, and we're focusing more on participation and active citizenship and such things. And I would ask myself if it's not worth reintroducing this democracy and rights-related perspective a little bit again. Yeah, that's somehow the question also.
Who'd like to come in, Mr. Anderson? No?
Yes,
yeah.
I mean, I think this is really key, because if we want to have a development there and give it a push, then we need to take the consumer perspective when it comes to digital. We should keep them away, and we should try to have a much more participatory approach, so that we can support participation or also innovation, so that we can use it in a way to maybe also to downgrade barriers in the process of education and hierarchies we are having in our educational system, so that we can give people much more a push for becoming involved also in society. And for me, this is also something really important, what democracy or what also education should be about. It's not just about getting informations, it's about becoming part of the process, at least in the democracy and in our European democracy. And there is also something where I think we can play a very interesting role from a global perspective, because I mean, nobody would do it in the way like we could at least do it. And there are some good examples for it. In Germany, there is, for example, the project called Aula from Marina Westbrand, further politician, promoting this already with online tools, participatory projects in schools with very young people in schools, where they are actually learning to not just use technology, and where not just digital tools will be used for education, but where there actually will be built up democracy and democratic involvement. And I think also there, as I said, Aula, but there are different projects. There are good solutions for it, but we need to integrate that so that it's not just like a best practice example, but this will be, the majority line in our educational system in Europe.
Mr. Negrescu, did you want to come in?
Yeah, so several issues have been raised in your last interventions that are key in my opinion. Now that my technical problems have been resolved, I would like to touch upon them. So first of all, yes, we speak about a new dimension of citizenship today, which is again this digital dimension of it that has to be taken into consideration, which is largely global, but in the same time, which raises a lot of challenges. Generating new rights, new opportunities, but again, we have to deal with the side effects of all of that, some of which might be negative. The fact that we switch a lot of things from current daily life to the digital side without reflecting upon it. The fact that, of course, if we respect certain rules, let's say in daily lives, when going to a shop, the online shop should respect them as well. The fact that, of course, if we can protect our data offline, the data should be protected offline as well. If we protect children from, again, abuses, from different types of attacks and so forth, we have to protect them online as well. Online doesn't mean that we forget about the rights and obligations that we have as citizens. So, of course, indeed, we need to study that and to establish a way to pursue that in the future, because the digitalization, the transformation is going to continue and is going to touch really all the aspects of our lives. And of course, by touching all the aspects of our life, we have to be clear on what and how we want to do that and who has ownership over that, over the process. For the time being, internet users, online users of digital tools have been consumers. We bought computers, we got access to the internet, we are buying digital small robots and so forth. We use them. We are, of course, the ones that have this choice of going and buying the product. But more and more through the digital transformation, we started to buy things that we are not aware of. We started to become a consumer without being aware of. We go online, we search on a research engine, and we are a consumer without actually knowing that we're a consumer. Because we believe that because it is for free, we don't need to pay for it immediately, that everything is open and transparent, which is not easy to be done. And even today with digital education, we introduced, because we were pressured by the pandemic, to digitalize our educational systems. And we took the already existing digital platforms available online, some of which are really good. But we didn't question enough whether they are sure, whether they are safe, whether they offer enough, pedagogical tools for the educational process to continue at a high quality level, or at the quality level that could be provided using digital tools and digital format. So again, we need to discuss upon that, and we need to define all of that. Of course, this is not a philosophical issue or just a philosophical issue, but yes, indeed, it raises a lot of ethical issues, a lot of ethical questions that have to be addressed openly by decision makers like ourselves. And I think both of us here are trying to address those issues, but in the same time, together with you, representatives of the civil society, with local stakeholders, but with the participants at those different processes, especially here, I'm referring to education. And of course, if we have become a consumer, we cannot say, look, tomorrow will not be a consumer. Our pupils, our students are now consumers of digital educational platforms. And of course, if they are a consumer today, we have to define that very clearly of what is the process that is currently happening, how to protect them in the near future. So of course, here I don't share the point of view of my colleague. I believe at European level, we can come up with better solutions because again, we are learning from each other. We can have an excellent solution in France and an excellent solution in Finland. Maybe we are doing better on some things in Romania, in my country, and maybe we are doing on others better things in Spain. And we need to exchange on those topics. This doesn't mean that someone in Brussels has to decide for us. No, it means we can meet in Brussels or online today and find the best solutions available on the ground. And what I called upon the Commission, and here again, we need your help, is to be more open-minded in doing so, in searching for those ideas on the ground, being, opening their doors to all relevant stakeholders, and even the representations of the European Commission on the ground in different member states have to be more open in engaging with relevant stakeholders in the field of digital transformation and education. They shouldn't stay in the Brussels bubble or in the pro-European bubble. They should go out and meet people and learn about the solutions and see what can be enhanced and upgraded at European level, or at least implemented in other countries that are willing to do so, because it's about the will of doing so. The digital process digital transformation is a process that depends on the will of people to be part of the process and to define it. They will never have the will to participate and be part of the process if they don't believe that this is a democratic process and if they don't believe that they have ownership over it. The ownership shouldn't be given to just a couple, the ones that are digitalized, and I'm digitalized. I used to be a digital entrepreneur myself, but it shouldn't belong to those people. It should belong to everyone and adapted, of course, according to everyone's needs. So I believe, again, your debate is an excellent moment, an excellent occasion to do that. But also we can use this moment of the pandemic that offers, a lot of challenges, but also opportunities, it seems, to underline those issues and to see how we can address them in an efficient way. Because otherwise, if we do not address those issues right now, we will do it like we did it in the last couple of years. We will debate it every 5 years. Mm-hmm. We do a plan. After 5 years, we do an implementation report, and that's about it. I don't want that, really. We are both young MEPs. We want things to move a little bit faster, and we want to be part of the process and not wait for 5 years to see a report that very few people are reading. We have to make sure that this is an open process and that is continuing and evolving all the way.
Thank you. Thanks very much. I'm going to bring in a couple of people who've put some stuff in the chat. Lisette van der Ark, you said you agree that you agree that digital participation can make your world lots broader, and it could also be a vehicle for democratization. Would you like to take the floor for 2 minutes and just expand on that?
Sure. Well, I think it's one of the exactly these meetings are, I think, the point. Where it's very easy now to meet with you all in Europe from the home you're living in. So in that case, it's a clearly a vehicle of democratization, I suppose, a way of talking to people you otherwise would be lots harder to talk to you in this moment. So yes, and that's in this way, I guess we could use it to implement in education as well, to be able to give all students the floor to talk, for example, with students in England or France, or England not so much anymore, but France and Germany, for example. So in that way, I think it should be a good way to implement in lessons about democracy in Europe, for example. But then we have to learn about all the things around privacy and that kind of issues, which are easily overlooked, I suppose.
Great, thanks for these points. And then I wanted to pick up on some things that people were talking about earlier around experience-based education, resilience in the digital world, so making sure that young people and adults are resilient in the digital world, and how we can kind of break down the walls of the classrooms or the non-formal learning non-formal learning settings. And the pandemic has obviously caused enormous change, and Virginia was asking, are we really prepared, were we really prepared for such a sudden change? So anybody want to come in on that? Virginia, do you want to just expand a little bit on what you said there?
Yes, hello. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. No, I was wondering, I mean, I know some of the things were said regarding the digital education was really there, has been with us for many, many years. We teachers have been given, I mean, many digital tools, given many resources to update regarding digitalization and so on. But as Victor mentioned, they were there, they were free, they were like taken for granted. We used them. I don't think we really noticed we were using them. But not all teachers were using them in the same way. Some of them had the resources there and they thought, well, I'll keep on as I'm doing right now, and maybe if I need it, I'll use it. Some others, I consider myself one of them. We were really concerned about this digital transformation, and without, of course, knowing anything about the pandemic, for many years ago, noticed that the importance of digital transformation and digitalization in education, and we were using these resources. But for some of them was all of a sudden, and they had all the package of the resources there, but they didn't know how to use them from one day to another, and they didn't use them in a proper way. And if they are not used in a proper way, this is a weapon. This can be a weapon. So this is the moment, I think, with all this pandemic over us, to sit down and say, this is going to change the way we've got to teach, and digital education is gonna be for good and for more democratic citizens and for everybody, and to get more outreach. So this is the moment to sit down and think about how to use this in a more democratic, proper way, measurable way, because it's gonna be with us forever and ever.
Forever, yeah, absolutely.
So,
Thanks for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. So amazingly, we've only got about 10 minutes or so left, 15 minutes left. And before I ask the two MEPs just to give us a final few words, and Niels from the DARE network as well, does anybody else want to take the floor? Just very, very briefly, it would have to be just a couple of minutes, but is anybody burning to say something? If you are, just indicate in the chat. So nobody appears to be burning to say anything. So I shall give the floor again to MEP Andresen, and then to MEP Negrescu, and then finally to Niels to wrap up. So, oh, Janice has raised a hand. Sorry, I missed that. Janice, would you like to take the floor? Just very briefly, please.
Very briefly. First of all, not many adults know their rights, and therefore not many children can know their rights. Secondly, you have to live democracy. You can't learn it. And yet our schools, which are meant to be for socialization, are really not socializing children in democracy. And thirdly, there is a problem with the community. Little by little, we're breaking children away from the community. They don't have to go out and ask for things and negotiate. And I think that these three things are really hindering us in this transformation.
Thank you very much. MEP Andresen, would you like to say a last final few words?
Yes, thank you first of all for the good debate and all the interesting remarks also made from all of you, because I mean you are experts in the field of education and digital, and this is really interesting also, I guess, not just for me, but I guess Victor will come with the same remark. For me, I would like to take one of the questions in the chat up and take it as my final remark. Of course, this is not the new normal. Hopefully, this is not the new normal. And of course, this will not mean that we have to prepare us to become in a situation like that again. So, of course, when it comes to digitalization and education, we need to find a way to get the best out of both elements. I mean, with that, I mean that we need to include some of the strength we can get out of digitalization for education, and for also maybe educate in a participatory way, also related to people maybe who don't have access to education right now, and to all of the questions we were discussing in the last hour. And there I really see a chance now, because the understanding of how important this is and how big the challenge is on the other side has raised in the last year. And if we would like to take something good out of 2020, then it's for me, this is really the point. And this means that we need to work on that. We need to find solutions where we are opening the policy making, the decision making up, so that more people can be included, that your input from civil society will be included. And for my work in the European Parliament, I mean, it's my first year, it has been my first 15 months in the European Parliament. I can say that this is really, really crucial. And if you have some input also after the discussion today, then I would be happy to get it via email or also in a next discussion. This means a lot for me. Thanks for the discussion, and let's work on all the questions we have raised today.
Thank you so much for your contribution. MEP Negrescu, final words.
Yes, I share the point of view of my colleague that, again, this shouldn't be just a new normal, and we shouldn't address all of these issues just because we are facing the current pandemic. It should have been debated before. It's good that it's being discussed right now, but the discussions needs to continue. And of course, addressing the issue in a coherent way is essential. Also, with respect to how we are drafting the budgets at European level, but also national level. I'm coming back to what has been decided in the recovery plan. Every country should allocate 20% of the recovery plan for digital skills, for digital transformation, 10% for education. And this should happen. This shouldn't be something that, of course, we are begging member states to do. This is something that they should do because they need it, because we need it at European level. And an efficient digital transformation at European level requires all countries to be part of the process. We cannot do digital transformation just in a couple of towns of big cities or a couple of countries that are front runners in the field. We have to do it all the way, because otherwise we will not make it. We will not make Europe a leader in digital transformation, in the digital field or in digital education, if we do not do it across Europe. Taking care of people from disadvantaged groups, from rural areas, from remote areas, making sure that people from a disadvantaged social background have access to this transformation, making sure that workers from factories are also part of the process, as people that wear a tie are part of the process as well. So this is the key element in this regard. And of course, allocating resources is a key element, but also having an involvement of stakeholders, civil society, a lot of professors, again, pupils, parents. I know I'm coming back to that, but they have to be part of the process. The Commission wants to launch the hubs. I support the hubs, but we have to make sure that they are designed in an efficient way and they bring an added value. We should have that in the European semester format. We should have a permanent evaluation. We should have clear targets. We should have clear indicators. We have to coordinate better on a lot of issues. And we are not doing that enough, in my opinion. And we saw our answers to the pandemic on education. Some countries closed the schools, others didn't close the schools. Some countries digitalized, others didn't. So yes, there is a lot of work in front of us. And of course, this work should mobilize us in doing even more. Sometimes we have to regulate. Sometimes we have to leave the freedom. There isn't a perfect answer. And again, through consultations, we can define that a little bit better. We have to be courageous in the same time. But of course, you can be courageous when you understand the risks that have been underlined by the participants at today's conference. I know I really read all the comment over there. And of course, yeah, probably this could be, our conversation today is an open conversation. So do not hesitate if you have any explicit remarks or recommendations to send me an email. I'm going to read them. I read all my emails in the European Parliament. Not all MEPs do that. I'm sure Rasmussen also reads his email, especially the younger MEPs. We are digital native, so we really read all the emails, which is a lot, because we receive a couple of hundreds every day. So yeah, we'll read your inputs and we'll try to take that on board in our policy drafting, because this is key, not to be isolated somewhere in Brussels or in the European Parliament, which has its own bubble, but really to be open-minded, and you have that from us for sure. Thank you again, and it was wonderful to be here with you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for these inspiring words to finish off today. Niels, I'm going to hand over to you to have the final words and to wrap up the session. But thanks very much from me to both MEPs and to everyone else who participated either by taking the floor or in the chat. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you, Una. Yes, I started with this dichotomy of digital learning, digitalization of education, and learning about the digital transformation. And I think our discussion was pretty wandering between these two poles. And yeah, regarding the digitalization of education and digital learning, we learned, in particular also from a lifelong learning perspective, accessibility. Access is a key thing for people in peripheries, for people of different age groups, for minorities, for people that have not the equipment at home, not only students in school, where we are sometimes in Europe focusing on, and that's not bad that we are focusing, but lifelong learning focus should be something. In this way, we raised the question, we tackled it a little bit about the infrastructure for this learning. So let's look together which kind of platforms, communication tools, participation tools, and learning tools we could use. Probably these are open ones, these are decentral ones, and these are accessible for local civil society. Which kind of grassroots movement has the opportunity to get access to something like this here? So we can ask if there is not a demand in Europe also from this perspective. We need Europe can do more for the cooperation between the civil society and the pedagogical civil society, non-formal education, and the learning providers. And maybe this could also be reflected in the educational plans. For instance, like my project, it was funded in the Erasmus Plus program as a key Action 2 project. So I think this is the direction to open more people and more organizations these opportunities to build these cooperations and awareness about the rights, and not forgetting the aim of participation. And in the digital world, we have kind of new demands for participation. We should be reassure ourselves to balance this. And for sure, it would be good if this would be more reflected in the, not only in the analysis of educational policy papers from the Commission and the Parliament, but also in the priorities, in the measures, how it is then transformed and or translated in the fundings or in the national policies. So let's do a little bit more, put a little bit more learning about the digital transformation inside of these strategies. It will help us all. And thank you all for this inspiring and fast 1.5 hours. And also from my side, thank you, Victor Negrescu, Rasmus Andresen, Una Aitken, and the Lifelong Learning Platform as the ones that are organizing the Lifelong Learning Week. And stay in this conversation and put this kind of approach also to the other events and discourses in Brussels on digital education. So, Una, please.
Just a final word of thanks to our MEP contributors, to yourselves at the DARE network, and to all the secretariat at LLLP who are behind the scenes, or some of them are in front of the screens, who've been so helpful in setting all of this up and keeping the technology going. So thanks very much, everybody. Thanks for your participation, and see you all soon, I hope, perhaps even face-to-face in Brussels one of these days. So thank you very much, and bye-bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Have a nice day.
Thanks.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Bye, everyone. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.